In every war, the real danger isn't always the enemy on the front line. Sometimes, it's the one standing right beside you. And when General Patton discovered that his own men were being betrayed from inside, everything changed. General George S. Patton was not the kind of commander who tolerated failure. He was fast, ruthless, and completely obsessed with control on the battlefield. His armies moved across Europe with a speed that shocked both allies and enemies. Entire regions shifted under his advance, like they were being pushed by an unstoppable force. To his soldiers, Patton represented certainty in chaos. To his enemies, he represented fear. But even the most powerful commanders depend on something fragile: information, orders, and trust. And slowly, Patton began to notice that something inside his system was breaking. At first, it didn't look serious. A supply convoy arriving short by a small margin. A report that didn't match the numbers from the field. A delay in communication that shouldn't have happened. Individually, none of it was enough to raise alarm. But Patton had spent his entire life in war. And he knew one rule better than anyone. In war, repetition is never random. Something was happening behind the structure he built, and it was starting to leave a pattern. It started with logistics, the part of war that is supposed to be predictable. Fuel convoys began arriving short. Ammunition counts didn't match the official records. And sometimes, entire supply shipments would arrive hours later than scheduled, without any clear reason. At first, his officers tried to explain it away. Chaos of war. Communication errors. Field confusion. But Patton didn't accept simple explanations for repeated failure. Because in his experience, mistakes don't organize themselves into patterns. So he ordered a deeper inspection of the system. What they discovered made the situation worse. Reports weren't just being delayed, they were being altered. Information was changing after it left command centers, as if someone, somewhere inside the chain of command, was rewriting reality before it reached the front lines. And then came the most disturbing part. Enemy forces were reacting too quickly, too precisely, almost like they already knew where Patton's troops would be before they moved. That's when suspicion turned into something heavier. This was no longer about mistakes. It was about information leaking from inside his own army. The turning point came after a failed operation that no one could explain. A full unit had been sent on a routine movement through what was supposed to be a safe corridor. No enemy presence was reported. No warning signs were detected. And yet, they walked straight into a perfectly timed ambush. The losses were immediate. And the strangest part? The route they took was classified. Only a small number of high-ranking officers had access to it. So the question wasn't how did the enemy react. The question was, who gave them the information? Patton spent hours studying the maps, the reports, and the timing. Every detail pointed in the same direction. This wasn't random. This wasn't luck. Someone inside his own command structure had to be involved. But Patton also understood something critical. In war, suspicion alone can destroy an army faster than bullets. If he accused the wrong man, trust would collapse completely. And once that happens, an army doesn't need an enemy to fall apart. So instead of reacting immediately, Patton made a different decision. He stayed silent and began watching everything, more carefully than ever before. From that moment on, Patton stopped treating the battlefield as the only place where war was happening. Now, he was fighting something invisible inside his own structure. He didn't announce suspicions. He didn't accuse anyone. He simply started observing. Every report that came in, every delay, every failure was tracked against one question. Who benefits from this? Slowly, patterns began to emerge. Certain officers appeared repeatedly around failed operations. Not in an obvious way, but consistently enough that it couldn't be ignored. At the same time, intelligence teams intercepted fragments of coded communication near supply routes. At first, it looked like routine enemy messaging. But when decoded partially, the content changed everything. It included timing schedules, supply movement details, and troop positioning information that should never have left headquarters. But the most disturbing realization came next. The information wasn't outdated or guessed. It was real-time accurate, which meant the enemy wasn't just observing Patton's army. They were being informed from inside it, and whoever was doing it knew exactly how to stay hidden inside the chain of command. At this point, Patton understood something most commanders never accept in time. If there is a leak inside your system, you don't fix it with suspicion. You fix it with control. And control means testing the system itself. But he also knew a direct crackdown would backfire. If he started arrests now, the traitors would disappear into silence. Evidence would vanish. And the network would adapt. So instead of reacting, Patton built a trap. He began feeding false information into the system. Fake supply routes. Incorrect troop movements. And carefully designed operations that looked real, but were never meant to happen. Every detail was controlled. Every document was tracked. Every communication was monitored. Then he waited. Because if there truly was a leak inside his army, it would have no choice but to reveal itself again. And this time it would be exposed in real time. The question was no longer if someone was betraying him. It was, who would move first when the bait was set? After the removals, the effect on Patton's army was immediate. It was as if a blindfold had been lifted. Ambushes that once felt unpredictable stopped happening. Supply lines stabilized again. Operations began to move with clarity instead of confusion. Because the eyes inside the system were gone, the enemy could no longer anticipate every move. But inside the command structure, the mood didn't turn to celebration. It turned quiet. Because everyone now understood something uncomfortable. The betrayal hadn't been random. It had grown inside their own structure, unnoticed until it was almost too late. And Patton understood it more than anyone. Winning the battle was never the real challenge. The real challenge was protecting the trust that made victory possible in the first place. Because once that trust is broken, even success feels uncertain. And in war, uncertainty is just another kind of danger. Even after the war ended, questions about this incident never fully disappeared. Military historians still debate how deep the betrayal inside Patton's command actually went. Some argue it was limited to a small internal group. Others believe the network may have reached further into the command structure than was ever officially acknowledged. But what is certain is the impact it left behind. Patton's response became a lesson studied long after the war. Because it proved something every military leader fears to learn too late. In war, your greatest strength is not just your weapons or your strategy. It is trust inside your own system. And the moment that trust begins to break, the enemy doesn't need to break your front line. You start breaking yourself. And that is the most dangerous battlefield of all.